The former head of the United Nations Population Division has described the traditional tired arguments for an increase in population as akin to a Ponzi scheme, and he calls it Ponzi demographics. Your comments on that? The argument is also supported by Mark O'Connor, co-author of Overloading Australia, the notion of a Ponzi scheme, Ponzi demographics. In addition, Professor Tim Flannery, along with Professor Mike Archer, says that no one has any real idea of the environmental impacts of population growth in Australia, and is calling for an independent inquiry and a rational debate to look at the issue. According to Tim Flannery, we Australians live in a fragile country with limited water availability, with a significant biodiversity crisis, and with the impact on future food security from climate change. And what do I see? I see a government driven by big business interests with a program for immigration which seeks to increase our population very quickly without any proper analysis of the environmental impact, or indeed the social impact. Your comments on that. And my third question, why are the Australian Greens avoiding the issue of the population question, even from a climate change or carbon footprint perspective?
Okay. Question one, Ponzi? Yeah, for sure. I mean, if we can't handle a stable population, it makes no sense, right? To have to have an ever-increasing rate. What was your second one about again? The national discussion, totally agree. I trust the people more than the politicians. We could have a vote on it. We're having plenty of elections are coming up. Put that on the ballot paper. What was the third one? The Greens?
The Greens.
They used to have a population policy in the 90s, and then Pauline Hanson came along and they thought it was too difficult.
It's almost like now it's like a left-right thing. They accuse you of being some sort of neo-Malthusian.
That's right. Yeah, I don't know. They used to talk about it, and then they decided it was too difficult. And it is a difficult discussion to have, but we can do it. That's my answer.
Nothing really to add, but we do have a representative of the Greens who can help us with the answer, hopefully, Doctor. So that'll be...
Thanks, William. I've left the Greens.
He's not a Green anymore.
I'm a doctor at the moment, and wishing since it's so hard to treat people one at a time, I wish I want to be an economist at the Australia Institute, actually. But working as a doctor, I see a lot of people injured, and a lot of them are migrants working on sub-award wages. And it seems to me, to pick up your point, that the drivers of immigration are the fact that they're real estate consumers, or they're real estate buyers, or they're lowering wages because they're completely powerless in their visa situation. I wondered if we should then look at those three drivers and look at the third one in particular, the cheap wages thing. And I thought maybe if somebody handed them, when they arrived, a list of the Australian awards, where the unions were and where the Fair Work Commission was, so that in fact every fruit picker getting ripped off actually had some chance of pushing their wages up, which of course would make the Australian natives, as it were, more competitive. Do you think that would help in terms of the drivers? Because the policy is actually for people who benefit and push it. It's not the Australian people pushing it, it's a certain group. Do you think we can attack it at a much more political level like that?
Look, I'm not sure how much telling people about award wages and unions is going to help. I mean, can you imagine rocking up to Germany or Italy and they go, oh, well, here's our award wages, go and protest and risk losing your job. Yeah, I don't see it. We can attack politically in many different ways, I think.
It's a perfectly natural thing for people to want to come from the developing world to a better standard of living. That's just a human thing. We've got too many people under threat of deportation in their job situations. So that threat of deportation and lack of permanent residency means that they find it more difficult to speak up, and it is an insidious issue, and yeah, we need to work hard to achieve an end to that.
Next, your name, please.
Peter. I'll be really quick. 3 quick points for your comment. I think some of your focus is a bit narrow, so I want to challenge it with these 3 quick points. So one is regarding population growth and in particular refugees. Part of the reason why there are so many refugees coming here and displaced people in the world is because of wars proxy wars that we fight in other parts of the world and destroy their, place of living. And so a lot of them come here. So we contribute to that. Our policy of exporting wars contributes to that. So we need to address that. Secondly, a quick point on the environment. I live in Campbelltown. There's a lot of rural area there that has been now taken over by housing development, all the things that you mentioned, greedy developers and so on. But that's destroying the local environment, the water supply, the air quality, and the farmland that's was used for growing food, has now got dense housing in it. So it's the way we manage things. It's not just the population, it's the way we manage it. And the third thing underneath of all of that is our economic system. We have a very unequal economic system. Some people are getting colossally wealthy, other people are unemployed and living on welfare and homeless and all the rest of it. So part of the solution has to be, it's not just about the population, but the economic model that we have, which is so grossly unequal. If we had a fair distribution of wealth, then everyone could have a more comfortable life. It's not just about population growth.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, basically. If you want policies to tackle political insiders, buy my book. Yeah, totally agree. I mean, we're asked to talk about population growth tonight, so it's quite narrow.
Yeah, 100% agreement with all the things you said there. And I guess one of the focus was population tonight, but I tried to make the point that there's no silver bullet, and it's not a false choice between population and consumption or any of that. So it just makes it more difficult to plan properly our housing when you've got such rapid growth. But agree with everything you've said there.
Next speaker.
Hi, Geoffrey Bauchi, Secretary of the Association of Good Government and convener of Politics and Above, and a proud addition to the Australian population. My question actually deals to the framework, the whole economic policy of dealing with the population deals with. I understand that decades ago, communities were planned with the residents in mind. That homes were to be 10 minutes walk away to the very important places to be in a community. Now, I think with the latest developments, they've thrown such standards out the window. They've thrown such standards to compel industry to even enhance environment. Instead, we sacrifice environment for it. What's so difficult about going back to the former framework of having an economy primarily designed and communities designed for the residents, for the quality of life?
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, what is so difficult? Anyone else got an answer? Look, I think one of the problems is all systems, all companies, all organisations, we get lazy over time. Australia's had a good run, and I think it's time again that communities need to actually get active politically and push for this sort of stuff. Nothing's going to change unless your seat in Parliament is at risk. You've got to use your demographic rights and democratic. So close. You've got to use that to your advantage, but I think you've also got to be very active. Get on the street, protest, got to push for what you want. Change doesn't happen just because things are good ideas. They happen because people are threatened and their cozy political situation's threatened. So I think, it needs a really big push from lots of different areas.
So property developers have become extremely powerful and very influential and are really overriding good planning. And I think Sydney and Melbourne were planned pretty well. Some people would disagree. They think it was too low density. But I think having backyards and so forth is a good thing. I think houses are getting way too big. But in general, over the last century, our cities were planned reasonably well with room for people, with backyards and close to amenities, but they're now trying to retrofit everything in where there's only one school in an area. It wasn't designed for double the population we're having there now. It was designed, you know, for 300 school children, not 1,000, which is now often the case in places where I'm living around places like Crow's Nest. Our schools have gone for 300 kids to 1,000. So too much housing development, and it's overriding the previous good planning that we had.
Thanks very much to the panel. Jim, I'm from Socialist Alliance, and I just wanted to perhaps speak, following on from a previous speaker, it in the international context. We don't want to be seen as somehow a selfish country in a world of pain. And if I'm not mistaken, the current population of Australia is about 27 million, something like that, which is about the same, is it? I think so. About the same population as Greater Mexico City. So, in the world
So what's your
scale-
question? Come on.
So what?
I'm getting to the question very quickly. Unfortunately, we have to face to the political facts in Australia that the population question is overridden with the question of racism in this country and an anti-migrant, an anti-refugee issue. And the main, I'm not accusing our speakers of that. I'm just saying this is the debate. The main speakers in favour of reduced population. I'm not.
Okay, it's enough, it's enough.
The main speakers in favour of reduced population at the moment are Tony Abbott and Peter Dutton. That is a fact. That is a fact, and that is the discourse into which we have to put our arguments. Now, I totally agree with sustainable Australia in a sustainable world, but we have to tackle this question of how are we going to tackle the migration question going into Europe. But this is caused by third world conditions, not by population growth itself. It's tackling the social system we have in the world is the only way we will create a sustainable world and a sustainable population. We must tackle the social conditions and fundamentally big business controlling the systems of the world. That's the only way we will create a sustainable population and a sustainable world. Okay, if you'd like to comment, thank you.
Thanks for that question. I largely agree again. So we have had a poisoning of the population/immigration debate by the likes of Peter Dutton and Pauline Hanson in particular. Made it really difficult for people like me to come along and say, you know, we want to talk about numbers and sustainability. And so we often, you know, come across, you know, accusations of racism or whatever it is. So when you look at overseas as well, a country like Egypt, 1960 had a population similar to that of Australia. It does now in the sort of 20 millions. They were exporters of food and oil at that point, wheat, and now their population's 80-something million, and they're having to import food, import oil, so they're struggling. And one of the reasons is corruption and all of those things, but it's also rapid population growth where you've got many more people wanting to consume a finite resource base. So it is part of the mix in terms of people movements along with wars, and but often there is a link in part to population growth there as well. So, but we do need major changes in our economic system, and I think we'd have a lot of common ground around public asset ownership and those types of things. But in the end, we are a sovereign country, and we do need to make decisions, and our politicians do sign an oath to look after the people in our country, and we do need to, I think, lead by example and help others. I think rather than trying to relocate ever-increasing numbers of people into Australia, you can do it much more cost-effectively and efficiently by helping them in the region that they're in with foreign aid and things like, you know, female empowerment and so forth. So I think there's a mix of things you can do very effectively without rapidly growing your own population. But largely agree with your points.
Last question. That's the last question.
Hi, my name is Warren. I'd like to ask Cameron in particular, even if we stopped all immigration tomorrow, Sydney and Melbourne and the big cities would still be crowded because everybody from everywhere else is coming into them because they're seen as the only places with secure employment. I know that in the past governments have looked at decentralisation strategies and by and large they haven't worked. Although sometimes you can see the odd bit here and there, particularly with tree change. I know of a town called Collector.
Question, come on.
Well, I know of a town called Collector just outside Canberra where it's tree change near the big highway. It's now growing. It used to be dead. But when it comes to decentralisation, despite past failures, should we still look at them?
The answer is not that simple. So the migration to cities is not an Australian pattern, it's a global pattern. So it's not something we can reverse unless we actively invest in public works in regional areas and attract people to those areas. You can't just say, you must live in this city. But if you invest in public facilities or invest to help the industries that are in those regions, people will move there to work there. So a more diverse economy probably involves investing in new facilities in different cities and outside the capitals and attracting skilled workers there as well. But it's not something you can just say, oh, if you want to migrate, you must live in this town. I don't think we want to start controlling where people live within the country. But if you start investing in, I always like the example, if we had a space agency, we'd have a lot of regional centres with a lot of talented people working, trying to launch Australian satellites into space. They wouldn't be, in downtown Sydney trying to do that. You'd attract people to the regions with those types of projects. While I've got the microphone, I have some of my books here that I brought all the way from Sydney, from Brisbane to Sydney. So if you want to buy a book before you leave for $20, I'll sit at that table afterwards. Thanks.
Last question.
Is there an anti-population growth party that people can vote for or support at the next 3 elections?
I happen to be the president of I wouldn't call it anti-population growth, I'd call it a party calling for an economically, environmentally and socially sustainable Australia, which includes slowing down greatly and ultimately trying to stabilise the population at 30 odd million rather than 40 million by mid-century. But there's much more to the party. We think that, as I said, that it's about jobs, it's about housing, it's about planning and the environment.